Yesterday, Disney Animation released their newest movie, Raya and the Last Dragon, in theaters and on Disney Plus with Premiere Access for $30. I got it with Premiere Access, I watched it, and here are my thoughts. Raya and the Last Dragon takes place in the fantasy world of Kumandra, where long ago humans and dragons lived together in harmony. However, when sinister monsters known as the Droon threatened the land, the dragons sacrificed themselves to save humanity. Now, 500 years later, those same monsters have returned, and it's up to a lone warrior to track down the Last Dragon and stop the Droon for good. I actually really like this movie. It's the first non-sequel Disney animated movie since Moana back in 2016, and based off the trailers, my expectations were pretty high for it, and I do think it did live up to those expectations. This movie did a lot of things really well. That's not to say it didn't have any flaws, but it was very different from a lot of more modern Disney movies, which I really liked. It's not a musical, there's a lot of action, and I think the main character, Raya, is really different from other Disney protagonists in the way that she's not always outgoing or always positive or always trusting like other Disney protagonists are. Speaking of the action sequences, they were fantastic in this film. Definitely some of the best Disney has ever made. It's right up there with Mulan for me. Both the hand-to-hand combat and all the fighting with weapons looked really good. The choreography for these action scenes was also really good and was pretty easy to follow, which is good because that can be hard in animated movies sometimes. The split of Kumandra was also really interesting. It was kind of like a post-apocalyptic world, which was so interesting, and I loved the whole mystical aspect with the dragons and their backstory and everything else like that. Also, the animation was really good. I honestly think this is the best animation to ever come out of Disney. It had a very wide color palette, and I liked that a lot, and the attention to detail is pretty good as well. The visuals and animation are so stunning and realistic. Each part of Kumandra was animated uniquely and really well to show the differences between them. It all just looks so natural, which really helps to make an immersive experience. This movie also used some 2D animation for certain flashback scenes, which I really liked, and I'd love to see Disney use traditional animation again in the future. The storytelling and world building in this movie was also great. There was a lot of interesting lore and mythology that we learned throughout the film. It introduced a new unique world in a really good way. It all made sense with the disagreements between the five lands. It was all fleshed out and executed so well, and it wasn't too complicated, and it was easy to understand for adults and children, which is really important in a movie like this. The voice cast also did a great job of making interesting and compelling characters. Kelly Marie Tran did such a good job as Raya. I really hope she does more voice acting and more acting in general in the future because she's really talented. Awkwafina's performance was also really good, and I think she fit her character really well. I think Raya was a great character. Like I said earlier, she wasn't always positive like some other Disney protagonists and princesses. That's what Sisu was in this movie. Raya was a realist, and Disney's never really done anything like that before, so I loved it. Sisu's also a pretty good character. I feel like they could have just made her into a comic relief character, and while that was part of her character, she also did a lot more and wasn't just there to make young kids laugh. The rest of the characters were really interesting and all had great backstories and work well together. I was really hesitant on a lot of them at first, like the Khan baby and the kid who had the restaurant on the ship, but eventually they got more and more settled in and I started to like them as well. And finally, Namari was a great character. I really liked the relationship she had with Raya. They really hated each other, and they had real and realistic reasons to hate each other, and that was portrayed so well. The only problem about all the characters is that I never really felt completely invested in them. I feel like if the characters were developed a bit more and we got to appreciate them even more, this could have been an even better film than it already was. The cinematography was also really good with all the different shots and camera angles we got to see, and when paired with the animation, we have a really good looking film. This movie also has a lot of heart and has some really emotional moments both towards the beginning and towards the end. About 20 to 30 minutes in, it seemed like it would play out pretty predictably, but luckily there was a big twist which helped make for a great climax and really impactful themes and messages. So there's a lot of things I did like about this movie, but there were also some things I didn't like that much. For example, this movie did not do well with the show don't tell method. Pixar is really good with the show don't tell method. It's really self-explanatory. They use the visuals to let the audience understand what is going on. Raya and the Last Dragon just kind of told us everything, which didn't feel organic and didn't flow very well either, and it just didn't work as well as it would have if they had just shown us. I also found that the pacing was really odd in this movie, which kind of surprised me because I think Disney typically does a pretty good job with that, so I'm kind of surprised that this was a problem. For example, the pacing on Raya's adventure felt all over the place at times, and there were some things that the movie took a lot of time to tell us about, but there were also a lot of things that it just kind of glossed over and didn't talk about much. I wish they had dived deeper into some of these topics and taken away from some of the other ones that weren't as important. I will say that the comedy in this movie wasn't great. It wasn't awful. There were a few jokes that I laughed or smiled at, and the comedy was targeted towards children, which is probably why I didn't think it was that funny. But I think the main problem with the comedy was that it just felt out of place in this world. For example, the group project joke from the trailer. I just don't feel that that fits into this dystopian world. How would Sisu know what a group project was? It just didn't work for me. But that's pretty much all the major problems I have with this movie. It's a truly fun adventure, full of emotion, and just a true pleasure to watch. Raya and the Last Dragon takes a lot of ideas from other Disney movies, but also does a lot of new things that we've never seen before. The story worked and seemed believable. The writing is mostly good. The animation is stunning. The characters and voice cast are wonderful. It's just a truly brilliant film that I liked a lot. Raya and the Last Dragon was a movie that I had high expectations for, and I was waiting for its release for a long time. And I'm happy to say that it's as good as I thought it would be. Yeah, it has some issues, but overall this is a really unique and interesting story. I'm so happy I was able to see Disney do something like this. It's really fascinating and different, and I'm so excited to see Disney kind of experimenting with different things than just a classic princess story than they've done in the past. And I definitely can't wait to revisit this movie in the future. It's not my favorite Disney movie, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.